The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. This week, I am joined by Anke Richter, and she is an author, organizer, journalist, and someone who has put herself on the front lines of fighting against destructive cults. So much so that on October 19th and 20th, there is going to be a live streamed and live in New Zealand conference called the DeCult Conference. And she's organizing that and promoting that like crazy right now because we want people to go. And that means you attend, find out, learn about, and benefit from the knowledge that is being offered by the various speakers and people there, including Dr. Janja Lalich, friend of the show and somebody who's been on here before. If you haven't seen her, you can check out my earlier episodes. Anke, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here. I'm really happy that we're finally talking.
Yes, me too. It has been some arranging and mostly on my... I'm so bad with time zones in New Zealand.
Time zones. Oh my God. I know. Hey, if you live in New Zealand, everyone's in a different time zone, I tell you.
Oh, that's true, isn't it? That's true. Yeah. Well, anyway, welcome to my show again. Thank you for being here. And let's go ahead and have a chat. First off, what can you tell my audience about, first off, just like who you are, what your background is, how you kind of got into this in the first place? Because are you a cult survivor?
No, I am not. Technically not a survivor, but also technically I think I have been in a cult. So yeah, it's interesting though. I don't really identify as a victim because I don't really see myself as having been harmed, but I'm happy to tell you more. But looking back and yeah, there's definitely been a process of untangling myself from a group that I was in and was close to for many years and that I now see very critically. And yeah, so I'm kind of somewhat on the spectrum between survivor, activist, not really survivor, but more like, yeah, activist, journalist, educator, right. So what can I tell you about myself? As you can tell from my name that we practiced before the show and my weird accent is that I'm originally from Germany, actually. I've lived in New Zealand for, gosh, 20 years. I've been a journalist for, almost 40 years, yep. And yeah, I've written 4 books. My last book is the one about cults, the one that's come out and with HarperCollins, also in the US, actually this year. It's called Cult Trip: Inside the World of Coercion Control. And I think what probably unusual about it is that I'm telling my own story as well of researching cults and what that did with me. And so you're kind of following the intrepid journalist / cult tourist through quite a lot of not just sort of culty adventures, but also some pretty heavy stuff. Yeah, and officially I'm a foreign correspondent here in New Zealand for the German media, and I also freelance for New Zealand publications. And over the last 10 years, I've been diving deeper and deeper into the cult world. So I think I qualify as a cult journalist, not an expert, but I love connecting people and bringing these experts together in a forum, which you've already mentioned will be DeCult this year. So this is all I'm thinking, talking, breathing right now is actually the conference. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I do want to promote the hell out of this thing because we need more and more and more awareness of what cults are, what they have to do with people's lives, and why people should step up and do something about it. And that's really what this is all about, my show too. Your conference, what's going to be covered there? Why should people attend? What will they get there?
Well, there's a lot because we have some of the things that you probably get at a regular international conference, you know, the experts and the survivors, but there's a lot more. So we have some live streamed panels. think, hang on, half of our content is actually live streamed. We've got 40 speakers, 20 sessions. The groups range from Jehovah's Witnesses, 2x2's The Truth, ISTA, MISA, Gloriavel, Children of God. I'm sure I've forgotten a few. Shincheonji, it's a Korean Bible cult. It's been aggressively recruiting here in New Zealand. Algats, large group awareness trainings, will also be in the mix, which I'm very happy about. So it's not just the Christian culty groups that we're taking a close look at. Then we have a survivor story jam. So it's a bit different from maybe your regular, more academic cult conference. So we have a story jam where some survivors give a little performance of sorts, of a personal expression of what they've been through. And this could be a poem, this could be a book they've written, it could be a song they've written. We have some spaces for a debrief at the end of the second day. I think we have Jilly Jackson also there, who is a renowned psychotherapist from the UK who's actually bringing cult recovery therapy to New Zealand. And this is the thing I'm most excited about with this conference, is that additionally, after DeCult, there'll be a training for professionals here in New Zealand, for mental health workers, where they can actually get their first input from a specialist in this area. So Jilly is a keynote speaker as well as Janja, and we also have Ulrike Schießer from Austria. She's the head of the Federal Bureau of Cultic Affairs there. God, that's a mouthful. And she's an expert in also how to talk to people who've fallen down conspiracy rabbit holes and are radicalized and fanatics. And she's a real expert on how to speak to those people. And she runs an agency that I think could be a blueprint, a model for what we would like to have here in New Zealand one day. So we brought her over, or asked her to come over, to basically show us the ropes. And we're also bringing her to Parliament together with Janja to have a dinner, an event there, to speak to MPs and politicians and stakeholders. So it's more than just a conference. It's like we're bringing these experts over here to New Zealand. They all love coming to New Zealand. It's a great place. Good excuse for them, I guess, to have a holiday at the end after the conference, which everyone will need, me included. And for us, it's really great to actually have people of that caliber here who can give some input and basically open doors. And there's a real need, a real, not just the appetite, but a real need for this here in New Zealand. We have a cult problem, like I guess most countries have it, but we just haven't had enough awareness yet, or enough government initiative or mental health recognition of that problem. So it's a professional conference, and there'll be lots of cult survivors in the mix as well, and hopefully also many people joining from around the world. Everything will be recorded, so even if you miss the live stream because it's too late at night for you because of the time zones, right? Or it could just work perfectly because we start in the morning, and then maybe if you're in the States, it's early evening, and you can actually start watching the conference and then watch the rest later when all the recorded sessions come out. So yeah, it's going to be pretty amazing, I think.
That's a huge deal. You have organized something truly impressive. I mean, that is a lot. I've organized conferences. That's a lot.
I know, right? Look, I mean, I'm kind of back in my old job, because I used to organize a TV interview show, a talk show in Germany, like a high profile one, and that was kind of my daily bread. Oh God, one of the speakers has jumped off got to quickly replace him, or there's an issue with that person, or this has come up. So finding people, connecting them, thinking of curating a good program is kind of what I did 20 years ago. As my job back in Germany. But of course, there are different things in the mix here, because we're talking about also people who are highly, sensitized to, they often come, they have, I don't want to say they have issues, but there is often a baggage of speaking publicly, or being told what to do, or being attacked by people on the outside who think that they're not the right speakers, or they're not representing the survivor space correctly. So I've had good taste of the different factions also in that world, and how to, be like Switzerland and just be neutral and handle it all professionally and listen to everybody, but then just sort of stick to our guns and say, look, we've invited these people, we think they're all good, and they might not all be 100% the perfect human beings. I don't think anyone is, and most of them, especially if they've been in a cult, they have a past. They might have done things there that they now regret and that they weren't good, but this is all part of the conversation we're going to have. So I think it's going to be super interesting also here in New Zealand, because it's a bit of a different demographic in the audience. The in-house audience will be quite different to, let's say, an ICSA, International Cultic Studies Association conference internationally, where you probably have the cult survivors and the experts, and often they're both, right? But not so much the public that would just show up. And I think he will have much more people from the public, and especially many professionals from the mental health field, and many journalists. I mean, okay, that's my wheelhouse. I'm a journalist, so I've been a PR machine for the last few months, and just basically, I think I pretty much got most of our speakers some kind of story and interview somewhere in the media, some like Yanya even, a couple of times or more. Every major media outlet here in New Zealand is reporting about the conference also already in the lead up, and they're also covering it. So again, that's a bit different from the niche where cultic studies usually takes place. So we're really making it more accessible, almost like a book festival. And I mean, I've been to heaps of book festivals with no book lately, and I love them. I love writers' festivals and something. Try to bring some of these things in. We'll have book signings with an author, Craig Hoyle, who's written a fantastic book, Excommunicated. He left the Exclusive Brethren, was shunned. He was pushed through conversion therapy as a young gay man. He's got a big story to tell, and it's pretty amazing, because the Brethren, or Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, PBCC as they're officially called, they have a huge presence here in New Zealand, and for generations, for decades, they've stayed under the radar, and they're also political force to be reckoned with, and economical, and they're also litigious. So I'm very glad that we've got a very respected author, and also he's the chief of news of the largest Sunday paper here in New Zealand. So I think he's done a good legal check, and knows what he can put out about them. And that's exciting also to see the colleagues in the media who are participating, attending, covering this. Some great cult podcasts involved. Sarah Steele from Let's Talk About Sects. So that's a panel that I'm really passionate about, is the cult media panel. So we're actually having a panel about cult media and narratives and stereotypes in the media. And there's so much, I mean, hey, just looking at you here, there's so many great podcasts out there, so many good educators out there. But in terms of my genre, journalism, I think there's still a bit of catching up to do, and a bit of learning to move away from the stereotypes and just the craziness of the guru and the weird followers, and actually look deeper, right, into the psychological components. So that's what we're all advocating for, is mental health, human rights, change the narrative, help the survivors. Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Excellent. Wow, that's a mouthful. That's a lot there. And that's good, because that's a lot. And I'm happy about it because of the journalists and the mental health professionals and government officials you mentioned, even with MPs and whatnot, and the connections that you're making. Because it's really, what you're describing is really everything we want happening when it comes to exposing or talking about these things in a public forum. We want government officials to be a part of this conversation. We need them to be. We want journalists to be part of this conversation. We need them to be, because you're absolutely right. The narratives are driven by salaciousness, not facts. And that has been a constant problem with trying to expose the abuses of these groups, going all the way back to the 70s. It's sexy, it's salacious, it's awful, it's horrible, it's Jeffrey Dahmer, it's this, it's that, instead of what it really is: regular people getting caught up in a control situation that just gets out of hand, and they end up ruining their lives over the whole thing, because some predator is taking advantage of them. And whether it's a one-on-one or a group situation, the dynamics and control systems are the same, and people need to know this. And they don't know this. They think it's a bunch of weirdos who they never have anything to do with, and look at those stupid people that we can laugh at. That's the narrative right now. And I'm very, very happy to see people such as yourself working to change that?
It needs to change. And not only is it unfair and it's doing a disservice to people who've been harmed, it's absolutely inaccurate. As we all know, I mean, this is the research is there that people are not less educated or stupid who fall into this. I mean, I'm the cult journalist here, and I've been involved in something, people think pretty weird and pretty culty too. So that's what more do you need to know? Who could be susceptible, right? And yeah, and in terms of the media, look, it's not just media; it is media in terms of looking at a huge unregulated market that should be getting the same coverage as other markets. I'm in a farming country here, New Zealand. The more traditional regs, I think they still have their papers about cars and I mean their pages about cars or the housing market or farming or business. There's always 2-3 pages in each old school newspaper, right? Where are the pages about the new age world, about the self-help world, about it's a massive unregulated market and it's become so mainstream, right? Yoga is mainstream, life coaching is mainstream. It's not fringe anymore. It's not weirdos. It's almost like you're weird if you don't do some of these modalities at some stage in your life. And everyone brushes up against it sooner or later, whether it's your boss pushing this sort of landmark style workshop on you because they're totally into it, or it's it's an alternative festival where some groups have their tents and their stores and you would never know that these lovely chanting Hare Krishna type people, maybe there's a totally different backstory to that, to their or Sri Chinmoy, or I mean you name it. There's so many groups that have a lovely shop front of a restaurant or free meditation class, you name it. And these are the ones that I just named they're the known ones from back in the days, right? But there's so many new outfits where you can hardly keep track with what's out there. And why don't we have more journalists who are actually covering that not in a sort of derogatory, these weirdos and everything is esoteric, well, let's just dismiss that, but more like, no, this is a marketplace and it needs good business reporting, actually, about the ethics and the predators and the dodgy outfits and maybe the stuff that is good, but then if we see that kind of more in-depth coverage, then there will be more understanding also when something really goes wrong or why. Oh God, I could go on. This is really my pet peeve is cult journalism and stereotypes. And I'm just really grateful for the podcasts out there because they are really doing a great job. And it's such a good platform for people to actually tell their stories, to be understood, tell it in their own word. And the drama and the trauma, it's all in there, but there's so much more around. There's so much more context where it's not just reduced to, she was a victim of that weird guru, and it just becomes this sort of 3-sentence story that is not representing someone's experience correctly. And if you think about someone who's come out of a coercive group, especially if they've been, say, harmed as children, especially if they've been sexually harmed, emotionally harmed, how awful it is then to go through, to jump through all these hoops to actually put yourself up for an interview, go public even, maybe even with your photo, have the whole backlash maybe from your old group or your family, legal backlash possibly, become a whistleblower. It's so huge. But then feeling that you're being misrepresented and you've been used again for someone else's gain or agenda. And often it's really just ignorance on behalf of media outlets. It's not even intentional. It's just because we're all so steeped in these stereotypes and narratives that we can just get away with it without having to look deeper. And that's what we need to change, right?
I could not agree more. I mean, you're literally calling for journalistic reform on this subject, and I could not agree with you more. I have said the exact same things right on this microphone many times, right? The misrepresentations and the exaggerations and hyperbole even, because Scientology, for example, is really bad. And yet people feel like they have to take it and exaggerate it into something it's not to get people's attention or something. It's wild what has to happen out there in order to get people to even pay attention in today's world where, it's an attention economy. And And ever since it's become an attention economy, it's been harder and harder to do this work, actually. Yeah. So it's a two-edged thing, right? There's podcasts and regular folks like me can actually put something out there, but at the same time, it's so much harder to get heard when you're doing that. So I think that what you're calling for at the professional level is way overdue and very timely and very, very needed now.
Thank you. It's great that you know that and you see that. And, you know, I've been blown away actually by the support around the world, like from yourself and other experts and podcasters and cult survivors. Because, I mean, first of all, when my book came out a year and a bit ago, at that stage, I wasn't planning the conference. It was just about my book. When I went and, you know, became more public with it, I was very nervous because I thought, who am I? I'm not the expert. I'm just a journalist who came too close, and I've, you know, told these stories of these people I've met and how that affected me and how damaged they were, and yeah, and I always thought there might be, you know, the real experts and the people who are the cult survivors and who have written down memoirs, that they would just look at me as an imposter and someone who, you know, but it's been so validating, not just because it really was a hard slog, those 10 years of, you know, of the research that I did on and off, and it's validating then to, you know, for people to read this and say, wow, this is a really important book, but also that they get it, that I'm trying my best as a journalist, and I wasn't always perfect in that, and it is hard, and to actually for the experts and the survivors, and sometimes they're both, right, for them to actually acknowledge that I got it right. I got it right, that I saw the right aspects of their stories. I went in it for the right reasons, and I came out with something that was maybe bigger than what I could hold, but it was essentially what they all wanted to be known. But I could shine a new light on it as a journalist, and also putting myself in there personally. So I think this is just a sort of whole backdrop to where we're at now with DeCult, that I think I can even take that further, that I have this unique position of understanding the media, being just like more like a normie out here in the mainstream, while I understand this whole cultiverse better and better, right? And I'm a big networker, so it's actually perfect in some ways. I just wish we'd had more time, more financial resources. God, it's been a hard slog as well, but it's also super exciting what we're actually putting together. Oh, one more thing. Let's do a little plug here for Scott Homan, the director of Witness Underground, a former Jehovah's Witness who made a fantastic rockumentary about his friends, musicians who were shunned in the Jehovah's Witness after they came out, and kind of healed through their music. And we're bringing his film to Christchurch in New Zealand the day before the conference is his premiere here for Witness Underground. Big shout out to Scott if he's listening. And yeah, he will obviously be involved at the conference as a speaker as well. But again, I just love also to combine the advocacy and the expertise with these kind of more creative projects and approaches. We'd have quite a few people zooming in or sending us videos, with some of them are surprise guests who are doing great work around the world. So yeah, I think it won't be boring. I don't want to use the word entertaining because it's not really what we want cult coverage to be, entertaining. But as you said, attention economy, right? It's not going to be boring, that's for sure. Yeah, there'll be enough in there to keep your short attention span busy.
Okay, fair enough. Well, again, lots there, right? Lots there. And you also mentioned the MP connection. And this is really where it becomes vital, because as you said a few times, this is an unregulated market or activity. And you're absolutely right. This is one of the biggest problems with it, is it bumps right up against a lot of freedoms that people have. And so the academics have sided with the cults. And this has been a major, major problem with law enforcement and getting officials to actually listen to us, because they treat it like individual crimes rather than really looking at it, more as the sort of enterprise problem that it really is. It's a group problem, not a one-on-one kind of thing when you're dealing with cults. And there's a dynamic there that is just not recognized in the law yet, called coercive control. UK has started with this. I know there's a couple states in Australia that have that have worked on this. There's some states in the United States that have put some coercive stuff together, but at a federal level or at a state level, there are very, very few, or like at a national level, there are very few governments or countries that actually recognize coercive control under the model we understand it to be, which is how cults work. So bringing in the MPs is vital, and very, very necessary if we're ever going to really move the needle on this dial. What are your thoughts on that moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the MPs, but it's also law enforcement, the judiciary. I'm just thinking of some court cases we've had here with a homegrown cult. It's like a Handmaid's Tale kind of Christian outfit called Gloriaval. They've had a bit notorious. Also, I think worldwide they're getting more and more seen and recognized for what they are, because there's been a good documentary and lots of coverage of that community. And we know that there have been court cases in the past where women from that group were finally, and made it to court, so to speak, to take their sexual abusers to court, because not surprisingly, sexual abuse is rife in that organization. And with the judiciary, that's uninformed about how a young woman who all her life has never learned how to speak up, how she would behave in court in cross-examination, how she would just crumble, how she's just used to saying yes and agreeing and not really standing up for herself. If you don't understand those dynamics, how can you really create the conditions legally? Or the same for the police. If you don't understand, if you go in a community like Gloriaval, it's just such a perfect example, because it's a small, closed off, compound tucked away in the West Coast. Everyone wears blue. It's not about what they wear. It's about that they're so isolated ideologically. So if the police goes in there because the complaints have been made or something does filter through, and if they don't understand that no one in that community will just openly talk to them if they go in another room, because everyone will be watching who goes in that room to talk. It just doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like in a normal school or in a normal organization or university where of course, abuse happens everywhere. And yes, but these things are on steroids in cultic groups like that. And then they're even harder to crack, to bring down because of, religious freedom, for starters. So I think a lot has stayed under the radar here in New Zealand because it's a very secular country. At the same time, it's very much a philosophy here, mentality, which is actually lovely in New Zealand, is that, each to their own. You don't tell people what to do. We're all cool here. When we're not we're not punitive, we're not controlling. So it's a bit different to, let's say, the country I come from, originally Germany, where people like to tell their neighbors what to do or not to do. There's a bit more of like, oh no, that's not right. I'm going to tell you right now, you should stop that. Kiwis don't really do that, right? Which is lovely. It's one of the reasons why I love living here. But when it comes to actually shining a light on what's wrong, it's actually been really detrimental. And I think the silence also of feminists in this country has been deafening when it comes to some, a group like Gloriaval, because it looks like such a lovely Christian kind of, weird looking outfit where you can just mock and laugh about, not take seriously. But it's actually a gulag where slave labor has been rife, that's established now in court. And the women are treated like just breeding machines. And where's been the outcry about that? Oh, because it's a cult, and therefore people are just seen as weirdos and as if they've brought this on themselves. Well, I tell you what, most of the people in that group have been born into it. Yeah. So for starters, how could they have brought that on themselves, right? So yeah, sorry for ranting about this, but we want to get the law enforcement interested, police, social workers. I think social workers, therapists are really taking note. Of course, but then it gets complicated because there's some agencies here in New Zealand that work with Gloriaval. For instance, I'm just taking this as an example because of all the sexual abuse cases that have been happening there. So they have to stay very neutral on the topic. They don't want to ruin their relationship with Gloriaval, I guess. So we're in an educational event, and at the same time, and that really I can't get my head around that, we're probably too educational. That there are some stakeholders or agencies that are careful to be seen to come to our event because they think it might close doors on them with the people they need to reach within the cult. Fair enough, it's better to build bridges and play it safe, but I hope one day it will be, it just needs to be like the one-on-one cult education everyone has to do to even work in this space should be that they should have gone to a conference like this so they have all this input. And it's not just coming from this conference, but we have some great charities and victim organizations here in New Zealand who are already doing some really great work on the ground, and they're all speakers and involved with DeCult. So that's the idea, to sort of create a hub where people come together and talk about this. But look, there is so much more work to do. Yep.
We are baby steps. We are so in the beginning. I have said many times privately, and sometimes publicly, we're in the wild, wild west of development of this. This is all very, very new.
It is, right? It's a new frontier almost. If you think back of sexual abuse education, or I just remember I lived in LA in Los Angeles for 2 years in the 80s, and I think it was exactly around that time when that actually became a topic. Until then, it just hadn't been. There were lots of reports, there were lots of exposés. It suddenly became topical that someone might have had sexual abuse in their past and they need to make that public, right? And it really wasn't a thing until then. And since then, we've seen, decades of education, of trainings, of awareness, of hopefully members of the public spotting the signs in children who are maybe behaving a certain way. That you can only see what you know, right? And it's the same with cult education. And I think we're so behind. We're probably doing a lot more there in the States from what I can see, but then what's happening so far in New Zealand, we're really just catching up here. But it is the next frontier. And if you look at the state of the world right now and the susceptibility of people because of the worldwide, crisis and wars and disinformation and the pandemic, if you look, things are not really going to get better in that department. I think we're going to see a lot more undue influence and people, sucking others into tribalism and echo chambers and radicalization and so on. So if we don't cult-proof ourselves and our organizations and our minds and our lives in that way that we actually understand what we're dealing with, if it's just a joke, if it's just fodder for entertainment, and we're not taking it seriously, then those people will be the first ones actually to end up in something that they might have huge regrets about years later, right?
That's right. That's exactly how it works. Ignorance is the number one tool of usefulness for cult leaders. Ignorance, not manipulation, ignorance. They operate in the dark. They operate hiding in plain sight, the dark. They operate really hiding in plain sight because nobody around them recognizes or sees what they're doing. Until it's too late, some survivor comes out, has to tell their story of victimization and abuse, and sometimes death has to be involved before people even around that place start seeing it for what it really is and what it's been the entire time. They just didn't know. And this is, Hannah Arendt writes about this, right? This is like, these are old observations. It's not original thinking to me, but it is important that people get this. And we have to keep teaching the lesson. Unfortunately, I've been doing this long enough that I can see, a group of people get it and then move on. And then a whole new group of people come in and they don't know anything. And you're like, oh my God, I have to start again. And it just keeps cycling. And we have to do this with law enforcement. We have to do this with psychology. We have to do this with psychiatry, different from psychology. A lot of the counselors get it. A lot of the psychiatrists don't. So right. It is so wild, wild west right now. None of this is regulated. There's no such thing as an official body of cult counselors or licensed, programs or anything. Jilly Jensen has put the closest thing together to like an actual program, but then there's all the ups and downs of cult recovery and the vagaries of it. It's a big, big, big topic.
It's a big topic. And, it was a big topic already in the 70s, 80s with some of the massive cult disasters and massacres from, Jonestown to Waco, you name it. But that's still often what the only thing that people associate with cults. Oh, and then maybe they've watched Wild Wild Country, which, as you probably hopefully agree, it's quite a misrepresentation of that whole movement. I mean, there's some huge blind spots, right, when it comes to the children in that movement, the teenagers, the actual survivors. Right, don't get me started on that. I mean, I loved watching it, and also it was very unsatisfactory, right, on so many levels. But that's what then people who don't really know much and are just starting to get interested in cults. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fascination, because if it takes you to a place where you're actually then taking it seriously, that's fine. If the media or the documentaries or whatever it is that's educating you is taking you to the right place. But it just really bugs me that a lot of people, cults is just, oh yeah, I mean, Scientology, obviously, which is not such a problem here in New Zealand, but then Scientology has started, I mean, it was probably benign at some stage when they started, and people just do courses, and what's wrong with an intelligence test or a personality test? Oh, these things don't really sound so threatening at first. And look at how many celebrities are caught up. I mean, you're clearly the expert here. Why do I even need to explain this to you? But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's just such a thing that people recognize. Oh yeah, we know Scientology is a cult. And then I go, yeah, but do you know how many other cults around the world or outfits, self-help outfits, have copied them, have taken some of their content, have modeled themselves on them? Would you spot
Exactly.
that? How would you know, right? So
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. I mean, Nexium.
Nexium, exactly, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's not like I've done a point by point comparison, but every single time I dive back into Nexium, all I see is Scientology rewritten.
Yeah.
Right. Just over and over and over again. And I'm very familiar with Scientology, not so familiar with Nexium as that, but still he literally just took from it. So did Werner Erhard with the forum, with Est and the forum. I mean, there's just straight Scientology in there. These things propagate one to the next over the generations,
What about human design? Because that's something a lot of people here in the alternative scene have really been pulled into. And I've once did a bit of, I mean, never really did a deep dive, but I think the guy who, I think it was a guy who started it, again, Scientology connections at least, something like that. So I mean, that group has a lot to answer for, not just in terms of their direct impact on the people in their group, in their movement, but also in terms of the ripple effect of people who probably wouldn't want to be seen dead associated with Scientology, because they know there's this, it's not good PR to say I've come from Scientology, but hey, come up with another good, clever idea. I can market to you at whatever it is, craniosacral, blah-de-blah, or human design, it's kind of like astrology.
Oh God, the human potential
look,
movement drives me crazy.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and the transhumanism stuff. I mean, these movements that basically live in denial of our actual existence and try to pretend there's some higher other level. There's plenty of goodness here at this level with where we're really at. We got lots to live for, lots of good things to experience, and lots of life to live with each other that is wonderful and feels great, feels very transcendent. You don't have to go into all the woo-woo in order to experience the joys of life, but that's what people, are fall for. Unfortunately, again, ignorance is really their greatest asset. I needed to put this in there since we've been talking about this. I wanted to ask you about your view on this, because I also throw multi-level marketing schemes into the cult bin when it comes to this stuff. Non-religious, I'm talking about Amway, Herbalife. I mean, these companies where you have business opportunities. People really don't see that one coming because they think cults are religious and they get this business opportunity. And I've talked to people who've gotten out of those situations of the multi-level marketing scam where they are bankrupt, their social networks are destroyed, they have ruined their lives trying to sell these products that go nowhere, and they never even think to themselves, I was in a cult.
Yeah, look, I'm so glad you bring it up. Yes, I mean, hands down, I think MLMs are culty and cults. And I've had my own experience as a journalist only, but also coming to close again with something that's maybe even, I don't know if it's even worse than an MLM because there's not even a product involved. It was a straight out pyramid scheme called Circle. And I think it's still operating around the world in different sort of looks, fractal, mandala, and it's all dressed up as women's empowerment. It's so insidious, and it was coming closer and closer to my friends' circle here. That was back in the days when I was still dabbling in ISTA, the International School of Templars. Let's just name and shame them here, which I was part of, and a lot of women, also facilitators in there, high up. So it had the hook was that I respected these women because of the great work I thought they were doing within ISTA. So if they were in this thing where everyone paid some money, I wasn't really after the money. It wasn't, for me, it was all about, oh, you were these special people and they're getting some kind of knowledge and there's something happening between them that you won't even get. Their plug was always, we will on ISTA. I know it's great, but hey, this is so much better. This is so much better. Letting you in on the secret. And then, of course, the whole sisterhood thing, which I guess where I probably have a wound, So that was my Achilles heel. And it came closer and closer. And then suddenly I realized, hang on, this is a full-blown pyramid scheme. Hang on. And then I started investigating and I actually blew this thing out of the water here in New Zealand in a big investigation. I tried not to I didn't name any of the women I knew, and it was difficult and had a massive backlash in my life. It was really, really awful. They came after me. It wasn't, maybe I should have let someone else do that story. I already came too close there. It's been a bit of a story of my life as a journalist lately. And also this is how you get close to things, or where you have the real understanding, because it is, you have a personal experience with something, or you actually, only I had the access to some of these women from the inside who talked about it. And the Commerce Commission in New Zealand then actually declared them an illegal pyramid scheme. So it really had a roll-on effect, and I hope it really made them stop. But to actually see how women who are working from home, solo moms, couldn't afford to start their yoga studio, whatever, they wouldn't get a loan from the bank. And then these false hopes and the false camaraderie, the fake language. They had a whole script of things that they could say on calls where they're recruiting others. Of course, they would never use the word recruiting, right? That was one of the bad words that were blacklisted. And this had come over from Bali, some expat women who were living a lavish life over there in Ubud and thought this whole thing up, or maybe it originated somewhere earlier already. These things usually have a shelf life of about 5-6 years, and then they collapse. And then someone comes up with a new window dressing for the same shit, different name. Excuse me, in this case, the dressing was so insidious because it's all about, hey, we're sticking it to the patriarchy. We have a real sisterhood here, right? We don't need the banks and the guys and their male system. We're doing it with sisters helping each other. And an MLM, a pyramid scheme, is the most capitalistic system you can think of, and it's so exploitative. And only the top dogs, run away with the money, and the rest just sits there stranded and disillusioned. And I've seen it, and I've seen the hurt it causes in the communities. It has broken up around the world, from Hawaii to Oregon to New Zealand. So that was actually before I ever looked into cults, was that I did this big reporting on circles. So yes, that was a long answer to are MLMs and pyramid schemes culty? Hell yes.
Exactly. Same tactics, basically. I agreed. They're not exactly the same setup as a Scientology, but they are using all the same methods. And for all intents and purposes, I call them cults for that reason. When you can't differentiate between the recruitment process and the retention process and all the social controls and influence and everything else, it's powerful stuff, as you just described. When you are See, here's the thing about it. Maybe we can make a teaching moment out of this bit, right? Is when your buttons are being pushed, right? When a group is communicating or marketing to you, promoting to you on your wavelength, so to speak, when they're speaking your language, man, it's like you found home. It's like, oh, this is my tribe. These are my peeps. This is what I've been looking for. And then they're so happy to have you, and it's just a big love fest, and it's all just so wonderful. And you finally feel like, oh, there's satisfaction, there's some certainty, there's acceptance, there's even something akin to love, and you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. That's exactly when you need to have the red flags.
Exactly.
You know?
It's a drug. It's when you're actually,
Is.
it's like when you're on, if you would be taking intravenous drugs and not realizing that that's a drug, I think then you have a drug problem. If you're not realizing that this is not, this is not just candy you're taking here, but this is something else, and this is why you're feeling so good, right?
Exactly.
I've been there. I've absolutely been there, and I'm still unpacking that because, as I said before, I don't identify as a cult survivor because I haven't been through traumatic experiences of harm.
Sure.
While I'm still unpacking how much I was hooked in and what was I chasing and how did these highs affect me. And as an intensity junkie here with, card carrying ADHD, it's actually not a surprise that I needed something that was so wild and intense. And it wasn't an LGAD, this is what Esther does, large group awareness trainings. But also the coach, I probably would have never gone to landmark training because I knew that's, don't want to do that. I would have been suspicious. But for some reason, there was something with this whole sacred sexuality tribe, and I'm putting air quotes around tribe, right? Where maybe at that time in my life, there was something very personal for me. I thought, I would have never been interested in that. But now I'm thinking maybe it's time to actually not be so cynical about these esoteric, floaty hippies and just sort of check out maybe there is something that I've just always ignored as a, person who's just sort of in her brain and in her mind and in her journalism and not doing all these floaty conscious things. And then I thought, okay, this is going to be my next adventure. Why not? I've changed countries. I've done, big stories around the world and all sorts of adventures. My next adventure is actually going inwards. And okay, maybe I'm not going to wear that much purple or use their new age language, but there's something there that might be working for me. I was chasing something. There was a promise. And then, of course, if there's all that mystery around it, because it's a mystery school and you do feel quite special. And you think, if everybody only knew and could do that too, and the world would be a better place. So I'm giving little workshops these days about how to spot culty dynamics, and there are all these things I think, actually tick, tick, tick. That's the same things that pulled me into Esther, right?
That's right. Yep. Exact same thing. It's the same thing as the personality test with Scientology and the seminar with the Moonies and all that. They all have their little things, but it's all about getting that little hook into your emotions, and you're not thinking, you're reacting. Yeah. And that's it. That's what they got you. They got you. And
then you're on the high, and then your brain chemistry changes. That's a whole other story in terms of consent and the things that then go wrong in those spaces. And Esther has had a shitloads of complaints against them, and there's still some accountability processes. And we actually have a session on them at DeCult, which I'm quite proud of because it's not so easy to get the right people in the room, especially in New Zealand, where we don't, some of the more outspoken activists about them are in other parts of the world. But hey, we're trying. Hang on, where was I going with this? So LGATs, and how your brain chemistry changes, and when they're, especially then if they're in a so-called, some people would call Esther a sex cult, right? But let's just say if you're in a group where you're working with sexual or erotic energy, or you're doing things, or where people are taking their clothes off, or then it's even, and then you're in an LGAT where your brain chemistry is just an overdrive, and you're just flooded with all these neurochemicals. And how can you even pause and really listen to your body and give informed consent and really check your yes and your no's to this next exercise? That's something you maybe never done before, would never think you would do in a room full of half naked people, and now suddenly they're springing that on you. And so consent, I don't buy it. Is there real consent in an LGAT if there's no if it's not informed, if you actually don't know beforehand what you're signing up for? No. And then you on the high when you come out, that's the whole other thing, the drug, right? You come off the high, everyone does. I remember every course I did, a week or so later, you feel like, oh God, I wish I could just be that person who I was. It's not even so much I want to be with all these people again, go through the same intensity. Gosh, it's exhausting and it's expensive, but I want to be that version of me again. It's like you got a glimpse of yourself it's like falling in love with yourself and you think, wow, this is how it could be. This is the potential that I have with others and how it can be. And I wanted more of that. And it felt like I could only get that by going back to these places and to these workshops. And then it becomes very commodified at some point. Also very commodified in terms of the community. Well, you can actually only really be part of that community if you book the next course and pay for it and fly somewhere around the world. And it has a very capitalistic, vampiristic nature, the whole setup. And it's been a while, it's taken me a while. And look, I have so much admiration for real cult survivors, right? Who've lived in a community where this was their whole world, where they've been harmed, where they lost, they had no sense of self, and then they have to rebuild their life. I never had to do this, but even on that small level of losing a community I was hooked into and something I believed in, the grief and the sense of, oh, the normal world, yeah, this is what I got to do now. It's going to be boring though, and to actually find joy in that again, and it was such a breakthrough moment for me one day when I went to some kind of, it's like a pagan, I mean, you're probably going to cringe and people think, oh, what's she into now? It was about pagan festivals. I'm not into it all, but I have friends who are, and they take me along, and I loved it actually, and it was lovely. And it was lovely for that reason, that there were some beautiful young body painted half naked people doing a little dance by the fire or whatever as a performance. And I thought, wow, this is not a course, this is not a training. These are lovely, sex positive, freewheeling hippies who are just doing this with their friends, without a teacher, without a modality, without having, they can just be like that. And this exists in the outside world too. It's not just in certain courses where I was chasing a little taste of that, because I wanted that kind of vibe in my life. And it was such a healing moment. And I thought, just trust that there some of the things that were important for me back then in that time of my life and in that group, the bits that are good and important and are helpful, I can find them without having to be in another group, in another tribe, and another program or so. Yeah, we can generate them ourselves and without all the trappings. Yeah, so
absolutely, we can.
Little light bulb moment there by the flickering fire and the music and the dancing hippies. Hey, thanks to that.
Absolutely. Well, there's something
you can't get that picture out of your mind now. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hippies and pagans aside, there's something you just talked about there that I think is really important. I'd like to underline for a moment, and that is what you just described. The words you used and the path you described there is almost a carbon copy of what you would hear on an addiction recovery podcast.
Wow. Yes.
Right?
Right.
I couldn't wait. I wanted to go back. I wanted to feel this way again. This is the path to what's called addiction.
Yes.
And that feeling, that euphoria, that glow, that, that we experienced in those groups, that was a purposeful, induced experience that is induced multiple times, right? It's a repetitive thing. That's what keeps you coming back. And if that was all it was, I wouldn't have a thing to say about it because it'd be fun, right? But then they beat on you, they break you, they control you, they dictate to you how you have to act, how you have to think, and they say all of these conditions are the thing you need to fulfill to get your hit again, to get your high again. You got to do all these things. And that's when you know you're in a cult.
That's when you know.
Yeah, right? That's kind of the problem here. It's this, the feelings are what people confuse for the material, the dogma, the source, the leader. They connect these dots and make it out that this experience they're having is somehow tied to or, conditional upon their membership, their participation. And that's where they make the mistake 100% of the time, because it's never tied to that. But the cult leader makes you think it is.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Look, thank you. That's, now we're putting all the dots together here, and I have to accept, and it's been it's not so easy for me to even frame myself and my own experience and my former group in that way, but there's no way around it. Yep.
Not from the words you've used. I'm not asking you leading questions. You're telling me this stuff, and I'm like, sounds pretty culty to me.
Yes, same.
Sounds like a cult experience, and I'm not trying to lay that on you. I'm just I'll say this. Like 1,000 kudos to you for recognizing and seeing what was happening early enough to get out of it before the nasty, horrible, awful, life-ruining stuff came in.
Yeah.
That's really, it sounds to me, that's what happened.
Do you know how that happened? Was because there were more and more allegations against also other sort of neo-tantra groups, and it was 2018. So the Me Too movement arrived about a year later in the spiritual and yoga and New Age scene, I would say. 2017 was when it really arrived for everybody, and then a year later, I think, really in the scene where I was so active at the time, and I'd always push these doubts or the things aside where I thought, oh, that's a bit dodgy. Oh God, and this guy sleeps with so many women, and they all line up after the course at his bedroom, and I just sort of rolled my eyes and ignored it. But I was there for the drug, as you said, right? I was there to get my fix, or what I wanted to believe in, that this is still really good, besides the shadow side, as they call it. And then some people from ISTA were also especially the leader, were also being called out in some Facebook groups there where I was active, like Tantra Not Trauma became the Me Too platform really of that scene. And then to actually see how they took that on board or didn't take it on board, and the mocking and shaming and gaslighting and the complete lack of accountability. I thought, hang on, and you're the guys waffling on about consciousness and evolution the whole time. You're the leader. You're the ones here who teaching us how to be better people, basically. Yeah. And this is how you react to that. And that was such a telling thing. So for me, it wasn't even so much what they had done in the past, but how they reacted when it was brought to their attention in the way that they couldn't just look away. And the whole organization and the obfuscating, whitewashing sort of PR stuff they put out. And I thought, no, these are not my people. If this is how they handle a shitstorm, nope, I'm out. And it was a healthy process to see that and to distance myself. And also at the time I had started, I had just investigated Agama yoga in Thailand, which is a pretty awful Tantra yoga rape cult. Let's just call it for what it is. Their mothership of a rape cult, Misa, is going down as we speak, because their leader has been arrested in France, and there's a big trial awaiting them. And we actually have a survivor from that cult at the DeCult Conference. Just saying, it's the first time she's gone public. This is a massive story yet to break. I think it's actually coming out in the next couple of days in Australia. Thanks to the DeCult speaker, and also there's a BBC podcast coming up. So we're going to hear more about Misa. So just backtracking, Agama Yoga was affiliated with them, same ideology, and I helped to blow them out of the water with the Guardian and for Germany and German newspapers and so on. And then the parallels just also became so obvious to me. I thought, hang on, this is how ISTA could end up in a few years if they don't if they if they don't take a hard look at themselves and change some of their ways. And then it became so clear to me they're not really doing that in the right way, and they've since gone through a mediation process, with individuals, but also with an organization that was trying to facilitate that. And I don't know, I sometimes wonder if it's even almost worse if an organization does that and then it looks like they're reformed and that it's all safe because they've ticked the boxes, but have they really, what have they really taken on board? Are there predators still somewhere there in the organization? Do they still have the same toxic philosophy of it's always on you, there are no victims, you chose this, you didn't set your boundaries, which is, if that's sort of the baseline of what they're teaching and how they're running their whole programs, how can you really reform? How can you? I don't know. I'm a bit disillusioned these days, but this is actually going to be a topic that we will be discussing at DeCult on a panel, with about LGATs, like Landmark and ISTA, and can these kind of schools or movements be reformed? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really tough question. I've been asked many times over the years in my Q&A shows about Scientology and can it be reformed, or variations on the theme, right? Did you get anything good out of it? Was it good? Is there any good in it? Can it be, fixed or something like that? And the answer really to the question, almost universally from my experience of this, and I've looked into lots and lots of these groups over the years, is that they can't. Reform would mean such a change that they would no longer be what they are. Scientology would have to be gutted in order for it to be useful in any fashion. And at that point, it's really not Scientology anymore. There's no, you have to take out Xenu, you have to take out all the shunning, you have to take out all the, the weird hypnosis stuff. There's just so much you'd have to take out. It's no different with Landmark, Est Forum. It's no different with NXIVM. These things are just kind of rotten to the core because, exactly like you said, I'm so glad you mentioned that, principles like the responsibility twist, which almost every cult has, where they twist responsibility so everything is your fault. Yep. And that way the leader gets off scot-free while claiming he's taking personal responsibility for the entire universe. It's absolutely mind-blowing, the hypocrisy that exists in these groups. So I believe that, no, I don't think reform is possible. I'll say 99% of the time. I think really it's just sort of these groups need to be sort of, dismembered, taken apart. And the other factor here, of course, in analyzing this is, did the leadership change?
Exactly.
It didn't.
Yeah.
If the dogma is the same and the leadership's the same, what changed? Nothing.
Walks like a duck, talks like a duck, but calls itself a cat. Okay.
Exactly. Right. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I think we're going to have to wrap up in a minute here, but I really, really, really wanted to thank you for your time today with all of this. I know you are super, super busy. And you've got, a million more podcasts you have to get out on and get the word out about this thing. So let me ask you, where do people go to, one, find out about you as an author and your books and your work, and then two, to find out about this conference and get on board and be part of it?
Yeah, for sure. To find out more about my work and myself, go to my website. It's ankerichter.net. That's ANKE, and then Richter, like the Richter scale, .net. My book's called Cult Trip. And to find out more about DeCult, and I hope many people from around the world will see what this, how many fantastic speakers there are and follow some of that content, they should go to DeCult.net. Programs on there, tickets on there, everything's on there. DeCult.net.
Beautiful.
19th to 20th October in New Zealand, which means when you're in the States, it'll be a little bit earlier for you because of time zones, right, Chris? Time zones.
That's right. All right. So October 20th, New Zealand time. Check it out. Check out the website. You can see it right there on the screen in front of you. I've got it there below her photo, below her there, and on the screen, and you can see it in the show notes as well. You can find the links. So do check it out. We this podcast is posting earlier than usual about that, so we can get ahead of that and get this word out to you guys so you can be part of this. I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about your work out there. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today, Anke.
No, thank you for making this possible. It means a lot. Fantastic. You're a great ally. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Okay, guys. Folks out there, subscribe, like, share, do all the things. And of course, if you want to contact me personally, you can via my website. I do personal consultation with ex-cult members, post-cult stuff, education, guidance, advice, etc. I hope you'll reach out. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.